For 8 years, she searched endlessly for her husband and daughter, who vanished without a trace during a trip to Europe. Just when hope was slipping away, the phone rang. A call from Germany that would change everything. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the precinct's cracked pavement as Stella Wilson stepped out, her shoulders slumped under the weight of another disappointment. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, shielding against the autumn wind that whistled through the empty streets. Behind her, Detective James Holloway stood at the station's entrance, watching her retreating figure. "She'll be back next month," the young officer beside him murmured, shaking his head. Holloway exhaled heavily. He had been through this too many times. Every 30 days, without fail, Stella would come, asking for updates, hoping for a breakthrough. And he had nothing to offer but the same tired reassurances. "This case is different," Holloway muttered, almost to himself. The younger officer raised an eyebrow. "With all due respect, sir, every year, dozens of American tourists vanish in Europe. Most of the time, their stories end with a handful of ashes in a wooden urn." Holloway turned back toward his office without another word. He didn't believe that. Not yet. The ride home was quiet except for the rhythmic hum of the tires against the highway. Stella's hands clenched the steering wheel as her thoughts drifted. Back 8 years, back to that bright, careless afternoon on the island of Curaçao. She could almost hear the lively chatter of the cruise ship's deck, feel the warm Caribbean breeze tangling in her hair as she sipped her iced tea under the shade of a white parasol. Lucas sat across from her at the cafe near the harbor, his fingers absently drumming against the table as they waited for their drinks. And Clara, 16, independent, full of restless energy. "Just a quick walk, Mom. The shops are right there. I'll be back before you even finish your drink." It had seemed harmless at the time. 15 minutes later, Lucas rose from his chair, concerned, flickering in his eyes. "I'll go find her," he had said. "You pay the bill." She had watched him disappear into the crowd, his phone pressed to his ear as he tried to reach their daughter. It was the last time she ever saw him. 2 hours later, with the cruise ship preparing to depart, panic clawed at Stella's chest. She had searched the beach, the cobbled streets, the lively markets bursting with colors and voices. She had begged for help from the ship's crew, from the local police. But when night fell, Clara and Lucas were still gone, swallowed whole by the island's sun-drenched streets. Back on the ship, she had stood at the rail, watching the island fade into the distance. The waves lapped against the hull, indifferent, erasing all traces of her husband and daughter. 8 years. 8 years of searching, of hoping, of enduring the slow erosion of her life. The investigation had long grown cold. She had called embassies, traveled back to Curaçao multiple times, followed every whisper of a lead. She had posted Clara's face on every travel forum, reached out to European expatriate communities, pleaded for someone, anyone, to remember seeing her child. Nothing. Ohio police had officially categorized the case as inactive. Interpol, once engaged, had deprioritized it. Detective Holloway, the only one who still took her calls, had tried to be gentle when he told her, "You have to think about moving on, Stella." But she couldn't, wouldn't. The posters in her back seat, the ones she restocked weekly, were proof of that. She was just reaching for them when her phone rang. She hesitated. Over the years, she had received too many calls like this, strangers claiming to have seen Clara, people looking for money, liars, offering false hope. "Still," she answered. "Mrs. Wilson?" The voice was accented, crisp, European. "My name is Bettina Schmidt. I believe I've seen your daughter." A hollow ache settled in Stella's chest. "Where?" "In Heidelberg. 2 nights ago." Stella tightened her grip on the phone. "You must understand," Bettina continued, her voice urgent but sincere, I do not want money. I lived in the US for a time. I saw your case there years ago. When I saw this young woman, I recognized her immediately. Heidelberg, Germany. Stella swallowed. The name meant nothing to her, but she had learned long ago that disappearances didn't follow logic. People were taken, sold, moved, hidden. She took a breath, steadying herself. How certain are you? A pause, then 80%. It was enough. Stella ended the call and immediately dialed Holloway. The moment he picked up, she said, "I need you to listen carefully. I think I found Clara." Stella sat in her quiet home in Orlando, staring at the flight confirmation on her laptop screen. She had booked a ticket to Germany, Heidelberg to be exact, without a second thought. The conversation with Detective Holloway still echoed in her mind. "Let the authorities handle this, Stella. We've been down this road before. You don't want another dead end." But how could she just sit still? 8 years had passed since Clara and Lucas disappeared, swallowed whole by the unknown. 8 years of unanswered questions, of posters curling at the edges from the Florida humidity, of phone calls that led nowhere. But now, there was a new lead. A woman named Bertina had reached out, claiming to have seen Clara. Not just any resemblance, but a distinctive scar, one that Stella knew too well. A thin, jagged mark that ran down her daughter's right arm, a childhood accident that had left its permanent trace. That single detail was enough to send Stella across the ocean, no matter what it took. She took a deep breath and closed her laptop. This was it. She was going to Heidelberg. The flight was long, stretching across the Atlantic like an endless night. Stella barely closed her eyes, haunted by the same looping thoughts. What if it's not her? What if I get there and find nothing? But the greater fear, the one she never voiced, was, what if it is her, and she doesn't want to be found? She gripped the photograph in her hands, the edges worn from years of handling. Clara's bright smile beamed back at her, frozen in time at 16. Beside her, Lucas, her husband, his arms slung protectively over their daughter's shoulders. It had been their last family trip together, a simple vacation that had unraveled into an unending nightmare. When the plane finally touched down at Schiphol Airport in Germany, the weight of exhaustion settled over Stella. The airport buzzed with movement, travelers hurrying, suitcases rolling, the rhythmic calls of flight announcements in German and English. She clutched her bag tightly and stepped into the crowd. Bertina had promised to meet her here, but after 20 minutes of waiting, unease crept into Stella's chest. Has she been scammed? Had she placed her hope in yet another false lead? Just as she reached for her phone, a woman hurried toward her, breathless. "Stella Wilson?" she asked. Stella turned, taking in the woman before her. Bertina was older than she had imagined, maybe in her mid-50s, her auburn hair streaked with silver. Her dark eyes were filled with urgency. "I'm so sorry for being late," Bertina said, shaking her head. "Traffic in Heidelberg is a nightmare." Relief flooded through Stella, though she kept her emotions guarded. "It's all right," she murmured. "Are you sure about what you saw?" Bertina hesitated only a moment before nodding firmly. "I saw her, Stella. Or at least, I think I did." Her voice softened. "I wouldn't have contacted you if I wasn't certain. She was here in Heidelberg not long ago. She was at a bar, and when she reached for something, her sleeve lifted just enough for me to see it. The scar. The exact same one you described in your blog post." For a moment, Stella forgot how to breathe. She had written that post years ago, grasping at any chance, any thread that could lead her to Clara. She had almost given up hope that anyone was still reading. "You're absolutely sure?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Bertina placed a hand on her arm. If I weren't, I wouldn't have called. Something broke inside Stella at those words. 8 years of emptiness, of searching, of waiting. It had led her here, to this moment. For the first time in so long, Clara didn't feel like a ghost. She was real, and she was close. Bettina drove them into the heart of Heidelberg, winding through the narrow streets lined with old stone buildings. The city was beautiful, a mix of history and modern life. But Stella barely noticed. She was too focused on where they were going. "I booked you a hotel near the bar where I saw her," Bettina explained. "It's not far, but if you want, we can go straight there." Stella didn't even hesitate. "No, take me to the bar." Bettina gave her a quick, knowing glance before nodding. The bar sat along a quieter street, nestled between a cafe and a bookstore. It was unassuming, with wooden doors and warm lights glowing inside. As they stepped in, the scent of beer and old wood filled the air, and low conversations hummed around them. Stella's heart pounded. She moved toward the counter, pulling Clara's photo from her bag. The bartender, a man in his late 30s, glanced at it briefly before shaking his head. "Haven't seen her," he said, his tone clipped. Stella's hands clenched. "Are you sure? She was here not long ago." "I've already told the police," he muttered, wiping down the counter. "No one here knows anything." Something in his voice sent a ripple of unease through her. He was lying. She turned to Bettina, who seemed to sense the same thing. "Let's go," Bettina whispered. "We need more help." Outside, the streets were quiet under the evening glow. Stella felt the weight of failure pressing against her ribs, but she couldn't stop now. "We should go to the police," Bettina said. "If she was here and they were already asking about her, it means they're aware of something." Stella hesitated. Her experience with law enforcement had always ended in frustration, cold cases, bureaucracy, people telling her to move on. But what choice did she have? She nodded. As they walked, Stella's eyes were drawn to a flicker of red neon in the distance. Her stomach twisted as realization set in. The infamous red light district. She turned to Bettina. "You don't think she does?" Bettina's expression darkened. "I don't want to say it, but we need to be careful." A chill ran through Stella's spine. For the first time, she wondered if Clara was still alive. What kind of life had she been forced to live? The hum of the city pulsed around them, the murmur of voices, the distant sound of laughter, the occasional blare of a horn from the main street. But for Stella, all of it faded into nothing as Bettina came to a sudden stop, her face going pale. "Stella," Bettina whispered, her voice tight, urgent. Stella turned, following Bettina's gaze toward a large glass-paneled window just a few feet ahead. Her breath caught in her throat. There, beyond the glass, sat a young woman. Her black hair fell in loose waves around her face, her expression distant, almost vacant. The dim red glow of the room bathed her in an eerie light, making it difficult to see her features clearly. But even through the haze of uncertainty, Stella felt something deep within her stir: recognition, dread, hope. Her heart pounded against her ribs. "Clara!" The name tore from her lips before she could stop herself. She rushed forward, her hands slamming against the glass. The sound echoed through the narrow street, cutting through the low murmur of passers-by. Inside, the woman flinched, her head jerking up in surprise, her wide eyes locked onto Stella's, confusion flickering across her face. "Clara!" Stella cried, her voice cracking. "It's me! It's Mom!" The girl's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she recoiled, a flicker of fear passing through her expression. Then, just as quickly as she had looked up, she turned away. A heavy hand suddenly gripped Stella's shoulder, yanking her back from the window. "Enough!" A deep voice rumbled behind her. She spun around to see a tall, broad-shouldered man standing in the doorway of the establishment. His dark suit was crisp, his expression unreadable, but his presence alone sent a chill up Stella's spine. "You're causing a disturbance," he said coolly. "I suggest you leave." Stella fought to steady her breathing. "That girl," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "That's my daughter." The man's gaze didn't waver. "You're mistaken," he replied smoothly. "Her name is Tracy." "No," Stella shot back. "Her name is Clara Wilson. She's been missing for 8 years." The man sighed as if he had heard this 1,000 times before. "I'm afraid you've got the wrong person. Tracy has been here for a long time. She belongs here." Stella's stomach twisted. "Belongs here." Bertina stepped beside her, her voice calm but urgent. "We're not leaving without talking to her," she said. "We can call the police if we have to." At the mention of the police, something in the man's expression shifted. It was subtle, but Stella caught it, the faintest flicker of unease. Then, before she could say anything more, Bertina was already dialing. "Hello? Yes. This is an emergency?" She spoke in rapid German. "There is a young woman here, possibly a missing person." The man stiffened. His hand twitched at his side, and then, in one fluid motion, he turned on his heel and strode back inside. Through the glass, Stella saw him approach Clara, Tracy, grabbing her roughly by the arm. She struggled weakly, shaking her head, but he pulled her toward a door at the back of the room. "He's trying to take her!" Stella shouted. She started forward, but Bertina caught her arm. "Wait, Stella! Let the police handle this!" Stella shook her head violently. "He's going to make her disappear again." A sudden burst of sirens pierced the air. Blue lights flashed across the alleyway, and within seconds, uniformed officers flooded the scene. The man barely made it to the back door before officers stormed inside, their Germans' voices sharp, commanding. "Stop! Hands up!" Clara froze. The man, now clearly panicked, released his grip on her, raising his hands in surrender. But before anyone could reach her, Clara let out a choked cry and stumbled forward, clutching her head. "No, no, no, please, I need it." Her body shook violently as she fell to her knees, her fingers digging into her scalp. Stella's breath hitched as she watched her daughter, her sweet, vibrant Clara, reduced to a trembling, desperate shadow of herself. One of the officers knelt beside her, speaking gently in German, but Clara barely seemed to hear him. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her eyes wild, unfocused. "Please," she whimpered. "I just need a little, just one hit, please." Stella's knees nearly buckled. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, reunions filled with tears, with relief, with embraces that erased the years of separation. But not this. Not the hollow, broken girl before her. One of the officers turned to the man in the suit. "What did you give her?" The man's jaw clenched. "Nothing illegal," he muttered. "She can leave if she wants." The officer scoffed. "She's clearly not in a state to make that decision." They wasted no more time. The man was cuffed and escorted out. Another officer helped Clara to her feet, guiding her toward the waiting police car. Stella moved to follow, but one of the officers stepped in front of her. "You need to stay back, Mom," he said firmly. "She's my daughter," Stella pleaded. "Please, just let me talk to her." But Clara didn't even look at her. She climbed into the back seat of the police car, curling into herself as the door closed. Bertina placed a hand on Stella's back. "We'll go to the station," she said softly. "We'll get more answers there." Stella swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. The police station was quiet except for the occasional murmur of voices. Clara had been taken to a separate room. Stella paced the waiting area, wringing her hands as Bertina spoke with an officer in hushed German. Moments later, Bertina turned to her, her expression unreadable. "They checked her identification," she said carefully. Stella's breath caught. "She has a different name on her documents. Everything about her identity has been falsified." "But," Bertina took a slow breath, "it's her, Stella. It's Clara." The words hit like a tidal wave. Stella collapsed into a chair, pressing her trembling hands to her mouth. 8 years. 8 years of searching, of hoping, of imagining this moment. And now, here she was. But as Stella looked through the glass, watching her daughter sit motionless in the interrogation room, her hands twitching, her eyes distant, she realized the painful truth. The air in the hospital room was still, thick with the weight of unspoken words. Stella sat by her bedside, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't moved for hours, unwilling to leave her daughter even for a moment. Every now and then, a nurse would come in to check Clara's vitals, adjusting the IV that dripped a slow, steady stream of fluid into her veins. The doctors had said she was stable, but the drugs, years of forced dependency, had left her mind fogged, drifting in and out of reality. Detective Roth had spoken to Stella earlier that morning. The police had run DNA tests to confirm Clara's identity, and the results would be ready soon. They would need her statement as soon as she was strong enough to give it. Stella had barely heard him. All that mattered was the girl lying in front of her, a fragile shell of the child she once knew. Then, in the late afternoon, Clara stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a long moment she simply stared at the ceiling. Her breath came in slow, uneven gasps. When she finally turned her head and met Stella's gaze, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, confusion, fear. Mom?" A strangled sob broke from Stella's throat. She reached for her daughter's hand, her fingers trembling. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." Clara swallowed, her lips dry and cracked. She looked as though she wanted to say something, but hesitation flickered across her face. "You're safe now," Stella whispered, stroking her daughter's hair gently. "No one will hurt you again." A long silence stretched between them. Then Clara closed her eyes, took a shuddering breath, and began to speak. Her voice was weak, rasping as though it hurt to form the words. "We were at the cafe," she began, her gaze unfocused, lost in a distant memory. "I told Dad I wanted to walk for a bit. Just a few minutes, I thought. When I turned the corner, I saw a man. He was just standing there, watching me." Stella's grip on her daughter's hand tightened. "He came toward me," Clara continued. "I tried to walk away, but then a car pulled up. 2 men got out. One of them grabbed me. I screamed." Her breathing hitched, and for a moment she couldn't go on. Stella felt her own breath catch in her throat. "And your father?" she asked softly. Clara's face twisted in pain. "He heard me. He ran after them. He fought them." Her voice cracked. "They beat him. They threw him to the ground, and then—" She squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head violently. Stella's heart pounded. She already knew what was coming, but she wasn't ready to hear it. "They killed him, Mum," Clara whispered. "Right there. They shot him. I saw him fall." A sharp, broken sob escaped Stella. The tears came fast, spilling down her cheeks, blurring her vision. 8 years. 8 years of uncertainty, of fear, of doubt. There had been a time when she had wondered if Lucas had left them, if maybe, just maybe, He had played some role in Clara's disappearance. But now, the truth was clearer than ever. Lucas had died fighting for their daughter. Stella let out a shaky breath, pressing a kiss to Clara's forehead. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Clara didn't respond. She simply lay there, silent tears streaming down her face. After what felt like an eternity, Clara spoke again. "They put something in my arm," she said quietly. "A needle. Everything went black." Stella stiffened. "When I woke up, I was somewhere else. I didn't know where. There were other girls there. They were scared." She paused, swallowing hard. "We weren't allowed to say our names. They gave us new ones. Mine was Tracy." Stella clenched her jaw, fighting the sob rising in her throat. "They moved us, again and again. New cities, new men. I forgot who I was. I forgot everything." Clara turned to look at her mother, something raw and broken in her eyes. "I stopped believing you were looking for me. I thought I was just gone." Stella couldn't hold it in any longer. She pulled Clara into her arms, holding her as tightly as she dared, afraid she might break her. "I never stopped," she whispered fiercely. "Not for 1 second. I put your face everywhere. I searched for you in every crowd. I never gave up, Clara. Never." Clara clung to her mother, shaking with quiet sobs. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was no longer lost. Later that evening, Detective Roth entered the room, a file tucked under his arm. His expression was grim. "The man we arrested, Semyon Vladimir," he said, looking between Clara and Stella. "He's connected to a larger organization. We believe he was working under Lotta Sokolov." Stella's stomach twisted. "Who is that?" Roth's lips pressed into a thin line. "One of the most notorious traffickers in Eastern Europe. We've been trying to bring her down for years, but she's untouchable." Clara inhaled sharply. "She's real?" Roth nodded. "Do you know her?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "I never met her, but everyone talked about her. They called her Madame Lotta. No one dared disobey her. She controlled everything." Roth glanced at Stella. "If Clara is willing, her testimony could be what we need to take this woman down." Stella tensed. She wanted justice. She wanted the people responsible for her daughter's suffering to rot in a cell. But she also wanted to protect Clara from reliving the nightmare. Clara sat up straighter. There was fear in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "If it means stopping them, I'll do it." Stella exhaled slowly, brushing a hand over Clara's hair. For 8 years, her daughter had been a ghost, stolen from her. Now she was here, flesh and blood, broken but breathing. And together, they would fight. The room was cold despite the thick blankets wrapped around Clara's trembling body. Stella sat by her daughter's bedside, her hands gripping Clara's, feeling the feverish heat beneath her skin. Clara's body convulsed in waves, her breath rugged and uneven. Sweat glistened on her forehead, soaking into the pillow. She whimpered in pain, her fingers twitching against the thin sheet. "It hurts," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Stella swallowed hard. She had prepared herself for this, for the agony of withdrawal, for the long nights of watching her daughter suffer. But no amount of preparation could have steeled her heart against the sight of Clara like this, so fragile, so lost. "I'm here, sweetheart," Stella whispered, stroking her daughter's damp hair. "I won't leave you." Clara turned her head slightly, her half-lidded eyes meeting Stella's. For the briefest moment, a flicker of recognition passed through them. "I don't want to go back there," she mumbled, her voice slurred, barely coherent. A fresh wave of tears burned Stella's eyes. "You won't," she promised. "Never again." The door creaked open, and a nurse stepped inside, followed closely by an officer. The nurse adjusted the IV drip, her face unreadable, while the officer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Wilson, we need to talk about Clara's long-term care. She'll need professional treatment in a specialized facility." Stella stiffened. She had known this conversation was coming, but she wasn't ready to hear it. "No," she said, shaking her head. "She needs to be with me. I can take care of her." The officer hesitated. Withdrawal is dangerous, and there's more to her recovery than just the physical symptoms. She's been through unspeakable things. She'll need counseling, security, time. Stella tightened her grip on Clara's hand. "I'll do whatever it takes. But she's not going anywhere without me." 3 days later, Clara's symptoms had eased slightly. She was weak, still haunted by night terrors, but she was awake. The officers returned, this time with questions. Clara sat upright in the hospital bed, her arms wrapped around herself as if shielding her body from the weight of their stares. Her voice was hoarse, her gaze unfocused. At first, she refused to speak. "Clara," Stella said softly, "you're not alone anymore. You don't have to be afraid." Clara's fingers twisted in the blanket, her nails digging into the fabric. "They'll find me," she whispered. "They always do." That night, Stella returned to her hotel, exhausted but determined. Clara was safe, for now. The police had stationed an officer outside her room. The streets of Heidelberg were quiet, the city settling into the hush of early evening. Stella pulled her coat tighter around her mind heavy with everything Clara had revealed. Lotta Sokolov, a name she would never forget. As she reached the hotel entrance, a prickle of unease ran down her spine, a subtle awareness that she was being watched. She turned her head slightly, scanning the street behind her. Nothing. Shaking it off, she stepped inside, but as she reached her room, she noticed something, a thin slip of paper sticking out from beneath her door. Her heart pounded as she bent down, fingers trembling as she unfolded it. The words were scrawled in thick, uneven strokes. "Stay away from Clara, or you won't leave Germany alive." The air in the room felt suddenly suffocating. Stella's breath came shallow and fast. She rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain, but the street below was empty. Whoever had left the note was already gone. She fumbled for her phone and dialed Bertina's number. "Stella?" Bertina's voice came through, groggy with sleep. "They know." Stella's voice shook. "Someone knows about Clara. They're watching me." There was silence on the other end. Then Bertina's voice hardened. "We need to call the police, now." Stella clenched her jaw. She had fought too hard, lost too much, to let fear stop her now. She turned the note over in her hands, her pulse steadying. Let them watch. She wasn't running. Not this time. The morning air hung thick with tension as Stella sat across from Detective Hartmann in the quiet confines of the Heidelberg police station. The hum of conversation outside the office was distant, almost unreal, as if the world beyond these walls moved on without them. But for Stella, for Clara, there was no moving on. Not yet. "We can place you both in witness protection," Hartmann offered, his voice steady, measured. "It's the safest option. Lotta Sokolov won't stop looking for her." Stella tightened her grip on the armrest of her chair. She had spent 8 years running from grief, from fear, from the unknown. She wouldn't run anymore. "No," she said, her voice firm, "I won't disappear. Clara deserves more than that." Beside her, Clara flinched slightly, but she didn't argue. She had barely spoken since their reunion, her body still weak from withdrawal, her mind still lost somewhere between past and present. Bertina, who had been silent until now, leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Lotta has destroyed too many lives," she said. "If we let her slip away now, she'll do it again. We have to stop her." Hartman studied them for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "If you're serious about this, we'll need Clara's cooperation. Every detail she remembers could help." Clara hesitated, her fingers curling into fists in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'll do it." Clara's hands trembled as she held the burner phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. The message had to be perfect, believable. "I made a mistake. I want to come back." Stella's stomach twisted as she watched Clara type, the words slicing through her like a blade. She wanted to reach out, to stop her, but she couldn't. This was the only way. Minutes passed, then an hour. The waiting was unbearable. Then, finally, a reply. "Where are you?" Hartman, along with a team of officers, moved in close as they read the message. They had expected a long process, negotiations. But Lotta's organization was cautious. They wouldn't risk exposure. If they were willing to meet so soon, it meant one thing. They still considered Clara their property. "We'll arrange a location," Hartman murmured, motioning for an officer to prepare a secure perimeter. "Somewhere we control." A location was chosen, an old warehouse on the outskirts of Heidelberg. Clara sent the message, her hands shaking. Then the waiting began again. The warehouse loomed in the darkness, its rusted walls swallowing the last remnants of daylight. Inside, hidden among stacked crates and broken machinery, officers stood in position, weapons ready. Stella stood near the back, her heart pounding. This was it. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the still air. Then the doors creaked open and Lotta Sokolov stepped inside. She was smaller than Stella had imagined, but there was something sharp about her, something that made the air feel colder. Her pale blue eyes locked onto Clara immediately, narrowing. "You," she murmured. "I should have known you'd come crawling back." Clara swallowed hard, but held her ground. "I had nowhere else to go," she said, her voice steady. Lotta took a step forward, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, slow and cruel. "No one leaves me, Clara. You should know that by now." The moment stretched, the air so thick with tension, it felt suffocating. Then Lotta's eyes flicked to the shadows, to the slightest movement near the crates. She knew. "Get them!" she hissed. The room erupted into chaos. Gunfire shattered the silence as officers swarmed forward, their shouts mixing with the sharp bursts of bullets. Stella ducked behind a crate, her breath caught in her throat. She saw Lotta spin, reaching for the door, only to be slammed to the ground by Hartman. The fight was over before it truly began. Lotta Sokolov, one of the most elusive traffickers in Europe, was in handcuffs. The warehouse was still, save for the distant hum of sirens. Clara stood motionless, staring at Lotta's crumpled form as officers led her away. There was no satisfaction in her expression, no relief, just exhaustion. Then slowly she turned to Stella. Stella opened her arms and Clara fell into them, her body shaking with silent sobs. "It's over," Stella whispered, her voice thick with tears. "It's finally over." For the first time in 8 years, she believed it. The house in Orlando stood just as they had left it. The same brick walls, the same wooden door that once welcomed a family of 3. The same living room where laughter had once echoed. But for Clara, nothing felt the same. She stood frozen in the hallway, her eyes drifting to the framed photographs along the wall. There, in the largest frame, was a moment from another life. Her life before everything changed. 16-year-old Clara, bright-eyed, standing between Stella and Lucas. The three of them, arms wrapped around each other, smiles wide and full of love. Her breath caught as a sharp ache filled her chest. "It looks the same," Clara murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't belong here anymore." Stella stepped closer, searching her daughter's face, her heart breaking at the distance she saw in her eyes. "Clara, this is your home." Clara shook her head. The word home no longer held meaning, not after what she had been through. The nights were the worst. She couldn't sleep without waking in a cold sweat, the past clawing its way into the present. Nightmares came in waves, shadows looming over her, hands grabbing her wrists, voices whispering threats in a language she barely remembered. She would wake up gasping, the sheets damp with sweat, her body trembling. Stella would rush into the room, holding her, whispering reassurances. But nothing could erase the memories. Days turned into weeks, and Stella knew that love alone wouldn't be enough to heal Clara's wounds. She arranged therapy sessions, but progress was slow, painfully slow. Some days, Clara could sit through an entire session. Other days, she would shut down, retreating into herself, unwilling to speak. The worst moments were the ones Stella never saw coming. A sudden noise, someone shutting a door too hard, the blare of a police siren in the distance, would send Clara into panic. She would flinch at the touch of a stranger, shrink away from crowds. Stella watched helplessly as her daughter fought battles no one else could see. Then, one evening, Stella walked into Clara's room and found her packing a small suitcase. "Clara?" Her voice wavered. "Where are you going?" Clara kept her gaze lowered, folding a sweater with careful precision. "I can't stay here, Mom." Her voice was quiet, but firm. "I don't belong in this life anymore. I don't want to be a burden to you." Stella's breath caught. She crossed the room in seconds, grabbing Clara's hands, forcing her to look at her. "A burden?" Her voice broke. "Clara, I spent 8 years searching for you. You're not a burden. You are my daughter." Clara swallowed hard, her body trembling. "But I can't go back to the way things were." Stella cupped her daughter's face, her eyes brimming with tears. "You don't have to. We'll figure it out together. But please, don't run away from me now." For the first time in weeks, Clara allowed herself to be held, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself cry. Healing wasn't a straight path. It was slow, frustrating, filled with setbacks, but little by little, Clara found her footing. With Stella and Bettina's help, she joined a support group for survivors, women who, like her, had been trapped, broken, but had found their way back. She started writing. At first, just small notes in a journal, then longer entries, pouring her pain onto paper. Words became her way of reclaiming the past, of making sense of the years she had lost. Then one evening, as Stella sat at the kitchen table sipping her tea, Clara spoke. "Mom, I want to help." Stella looked up. "Help other girls," Clara said, her voice steadier than it had been in a long time. "Girls like me. If someone had helped me sooner, maybe I wouldn't have lost so many years. I want to be that person for someone else." Stella felt something shift inside her, a quiet, steady warmth. She reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "Then let's do it together." Months passed, and Clara slowly reclaimed her life. She spoke at events, sharing her story. She worked with organizations that fought against human trafficking, using her voice to bring light to the darkness. And Stella too, found a purpose. The years of searching had left their mark on her, but instead of being consumed by grief, she poured her energy into helping other families, mothers who were still searching, who still had hope. One morning, as the waves lapped gently against the shore, Clara and Stella stood together by the ocean. The sky stretched wide above them, the water endless before their feet. Clara took a deep breath, inhaling the salt air. "Mom," she said softly, turning to Stella, "I think I can live again." Stella squeezed her daughter's hand, her heart full. "I will always be with you, Clara, no matter what." For the first time in 8 years, the weight of the past felt lighter. And for the first time in 8 years, they felt free. And just like that, after 8 long years of searching, fighting, and healing, Stella and Clara finally found their way back to each other. This story isn't just about pain or loss. It's about resilience. It's about a mother's unwavering love. And it's about the power of second chances. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice, one story, to remind someone that they are never truly alone. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay strong, stay hopeful, and I'll see you in the next story.